Here is House Speaker Mike Johnson.
The irony of the message is pretty clear for everyone. If President Trump was a king, the government would be open right now. If President Trump was a king, they would not have been able to engage in that free speech exercise out on the mall, by the way, which was open because President Trump hasn't closed it. They needed a stunt. They needed a show. Chuck Schumer needs cover right now. He's closed the government down because he needs political cover, and this was a part of it.
Many high-profile Democrats were flexing, trying to look connected to the people. Sure to never miss a camera gathering, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi posted this video awkwardly snapping a fake crown in half. Senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram is on Capitol Hill. Chad.
Harris, good morning. Democrats believe the No Kings rallies reflects what their base wants. The question is if the Democrats' message resonates with voters who are not progressives, or even those who supported President Trump.
This is what democracy looks like.
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 Lots of prominent Democrats, ranging from Senators Elizabeth Warren to Andy Kim, took part in the protests. DNC Chairman Ken Martin resorted to the Democrats' favorite form of protest, using salty language and upbraiding the president.
We will not bow down to any monarch. Here we are now 249 years later with that orange monster in the White House, expecting people in this country to bend a knee, to bow down, to kiss his ring, and to kiss his...
Republicans dismissed the Democrats' efforts to make political inroads amid the government shutdown.
The Democrats made crystal clear that this is about politics. The politics were on full display. The politics, the spectacle, is what the mobs, the crowds, the rallies this week were all about.
Johnson says he will meet with the president later this afternoon. There's now worry about the shutdown slowing government services, especially TSA and air traffic control.
I want to say thanks to all of the air traffic controllers who show up to work. They're doing great work. They got a partial paycheck a week ago Tuesday. Their next paycheck comes a week from Tuesday. And in that paycheck, there will be no dollars. A lot of them are paycheck to paycheck. So I hope we don't see more disruptions.
Now, the Senate could take a vote later this week on a bill to pay essential workers who are on the job and not getting paid. Republicans hope to dare Democrats to vote no. It would include air traffic controllers and congressional aides. Harris?
Yeah, Democrats seem to oblige them by falling on that fork. I don't think they'll have to try too hard. Thank you, Chad. President Trump and Republicans are ramping up pressure as they look into who is bankrolling all the protesting after the No Kings rallies hit the streets. They looked organized, so they're focused in on that. Here's the president.
I think it's a joke. I looked at the people. They're not representative of this country. And I looked at all the brand new signs paid for, I guess it was paid for by Soros and other radical left lunatics. It looks like it was. We're checking it out.
Senator Ted Cruz tells Fox News this politicized march is being organized by Soros operatives and funded by Soros money. No one denies these basic facts, he says. The Trump administration and the Republican Congress are committed to countering this network of left-wing violence. All that his quote. President Trump and Republican allies are looking at the mob-era RICO law as a way to scrutinize who's funding the protests. Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, member of the Armed Services Committee, also a United States Army Reserve veteran, and we welcome her in Focus. Thank you for being with me. So, look, if there's organization in all of this, what does that tell you? Why focus on that?
Yes, thank you, Harris. I think it is extremely important that we look at who is funding these protests. We have to get to the bottom of this. It is a much larger organization. It could be the usual suspect, of course, George Soros. But what we have seen in the past, of course, is a threat to local governments and property. And so we do need to make sure that these are safe protests. And I would say that we are thankful that there are no kings here in the great United States of America. What we do have are democratically elected leaders, such as President Donald Trump, who won in a landslide last November. And this is why these people are gathering, as they simply don't want the will of the people. The only king that we have seen so far through these protests is King Chuck Schumer, who has shut down the federal government and is putting politics over people.
Yeah, I mean, that's similar to what I had said earlier in terms of an example of where some of that raw power is right now. It actually is in the hands of Democrats who don't want to do the right thing. I mean, you heard Secretary Duffy there saying how long it's going to be until people have an actual full paycheck, not just a blank one. Your last quick thought, we'll move forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's correct, is that we have a number of federal government workers that are essential, our air traffic controllers, members of the military. We need to make sure we're taking care of them and their families so that we do have a safe United States. We can travel freely and also protect our nation.
Yeah, and you saw President Trump last week coming up with funding to pay our men and women who are in harm's way in the military right now. So that becomes a bigger load when you add air traffic controllers and others to the list. We're watching for all of it. Another vote coming up. We'll see what Democrats do. We are still waiting on Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to arrive at the White House to meet with President Trump. And it comes as the U.S. is pushing next steps in the Israel-Hamas peace deal. Israel says it is renewing its commitment to the ceasefire that right now, fragile but still holding, after some deadly violence that broke out yesterday. The Israeli military launched strikes inside Gaza after saying Hamas had killed 2 Israeli Defense Force soldiers. President Trump on Air Force One last night.
We're going to have to see what's happening. We want to make sure that it's going to be very peaceful with Hamas. And as you know, they've been quite rambunctious. They've been doing some shooting, and we think maybe the leadership isn't involved in that, you know, some rebels within.
Is the ceasefire still in place?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
All right, getting ready for some more high-level talks now. Vice President J.D. Vance will head to Israel tomorrow. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are already there this morning for those talks on phase 2 of the ceasefire deal. Here is Jared Kushner on 60 Minutes last night. All right, apparently we do not have what we wanted to show you. If we can bring it, we will. Meanwhile, Senator, this is a critical time. I mentioned it being fragile. Hamas is causing the destruction of its own country even further now by killing their own people. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Yes, it absolutely is. And thank heavens we do have a president of peace, Donald Trump. He has led to this extraordinary moment in time where we now have a fragile ceasefire, but a ceasefire nonetheless between Hamas and Israel. So we need to continue pressing forward. Hamas will continue to disrupt. I mean, we should know that and expect that, but we must be strong through this to bring peace to the region. So again, thanks heavens we have the right people that are leading this movement. We do need the Arab nations, particularly those that have been engaged in the Abraham Accords, to come forward and provide the necessary manpower in Gaza to keep the peace. We need to lean on these Arab countries to do the right thing. If they want peace, they need to be involved.
Senator, how can we count on them? I mean, we've gotten to a point where we've never seen this before in the world. We've gotten a ceasefire in the Middle East among people who were at war. But in order to do that, the parties who have been funneling money, like the Qataris who were part of this deal but have kind of a shaky regard when it comes to Hamas. How do you get everybody to buy in now to make it stick?
Well, this is the interesting part, Harris, and yes, you are absolutely correct. But we need to lean on them. And through a number of extraordinary deals that the president is doing with those individual countries, we now have greater leverage as well. If those countries want to continue to engage with the United States and look to the West for leadership, then they must engage to keep these relationships moving forward with the United States of America. So again, you know, President Trump is the deal maker in all of this. He has shown extraordinary leadership where it was lacking in the past 4 years under President Biden. So I am so thankful that we're seeing these steps forward. I will fully anticipate that we will have bumps along the way, and yet these are historic times, Harris, and it is all because of the work of President Trump.
So I mentioned Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and last night he opened up about how he feels seeing the last Israeli hostages come home alive after he lost his son to an opioid overdose. Watch this.
Steve, how are you feeling when they come up?
Elated. And I was thinking to myself, what would I have felt like when I got the call from Cedars-Sinai Hospital that my son had died? If the call from them was, he didn't die.
Oh, God.
We revived him. And these people were all getting that type of call. Their kids were coming home.
The Trump administration is strengthening the fight against deadly opioids by striking the drug traffickers directly. And I asked specifically to show you that from Steve Witkoff, because you can tell that this can touch any family, any place, even those of peacemakers like Steve Witkoff. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, announced the 7th strike on a suspected drug vessel off South America. And he says the attack killed 3 narco-terrorists and no U.S. forces were harmed. In a separate attack on alleged drug traffickers, President Trump said the U.S. hit a submersible craft carrying fentanyl and other narcotics. 2 suspects survived that, and the U.S. sent them back to their home countries, Ecuador and Colombia. Senator, just give me your overall thoughts about how we are now basically fighting against these cartels before they reach our shores.
Thank you, Harris. And first, to Mr. Witkoff, God bless him, his family, and every family that has been touched by addiction. And I believe, let's say, 2 things. One, these strikes are lawfully sound. We can lawfully engage in these strikes against the cartels and those that are transporting dangerous product into the United States of America. 2, it is morally sound. Just look across the United States. Look at the Iowans that have lost their lives due to this type of activity. They are ramping up families into addiction and sorrowful times in dealing with those addictions. We've seen many loss of lives, not just in Iowa, but across the United States. So 2 points there. 1, it's lawfully sound. We can do this as a United States of America. 2, it is morally sound. And I'm so thankful that the president is engaging and authorizing these strikes to protect our American families.
Senator Ernst of the great state of Iowa, good to have you in focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.